I can really see the impact of community schools in our school. So when she talks about sustainability, I would really like that for like the upcoming people from middle school to experience that and be part of that process, you know, because it's really great.
The education landscape is constantly evolving. Staying ahead of the trends is essential. Welcome to EdBuzz LA County, where we explore groundbreaking initiatives, inspiring stories, and innovative practices shaping the future of learning here in Southern California. Today we're talking about community schools, hubs where schools, families, and community partners come together to support the whole child. They transform how schools operate, from being standalone institutions to being centers of community life where families are true partners and local voices shape the work. With us today are Alicia Garupa, LACOE's Chief of Wellbeing and Support Services. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
And we also have Dr. Michelle Alferez, Director 3 of the Community Schools Initiative. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks for having us here.
And finally, we have Chinosom Okpara, an 11th grade student with Hawthorne Math and Science Academy, who is also a member of LACOE's Community Schools Student Catalyst Council. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. So we're going to start with you, Chinosom. Tell us about what community schools are from your perspective.
In my perspective, a community school is a place where students, teachers, and families' voices are heard and their needs and concerns are implemented into schools to make it a better place, not only for them, but for the students.
Absolutely. And Alicia, can you build on that a little bit, from the community schools model, from the larger perspective?
Absolutely. So I think a lot about the systems in our public schools, right? And I think something that we've learned or we realize is systems are perfectly designed to get the results they do. Public schools have not always really been designed with all students, families, and staff in mind. Mm-hmm. And the way that we can transform schools requires that we hear voices, as the idea that this is all of our school, and that it is our shared opportunity to support young people in their development, and that's more than what happens when people come in and outside of a school gate, and there is an engagement in the community. So it's really eliminating, I think, the separation between school and community, and literally making schools are a part of the communities themselves.
And Michelle, from what you do, how do we think of partnerships in this way? When we think of students, families, parents, community members, what does that look like?
Yeah, and I think Chinosom kind of named it, right? Where students, families, and staff truly have voice. And we often use the term engagement, but rather than thinking about engagement and just being a part of, we're actually partnering with students, families, and staff. And what that means is they're at the table giving their voice in making decisions, really, in what's happening in the school community. So I think it's really about being at the table and being equal partners in what our schools are. And so really bringing, again, the co-design, the partnering with, the voices side by side with each other.
Well, and uplifting students' voices is a big part of that, right? Mm-hmm. And Chinosom, you've had a great opportunity with serving on the council and being an active participant in your school. Can you share a little bit about what having a voice has meant for you?
What is having a voice has meant a lot of different things for me. It's giving me the opportunity to share different ideas that I get from my school. It's giving me an idea to get different perspective from different students on the council. Mm-hmm. We go to so many different schools and they range in different sizes and different environments. So I do come from a small school. So my perspective of schools was greatly different from what most students are used to.
That's awesome. Is there an example of an opportunity you've had to provide voice?
At my school, we had a workshop that was implemented based on my idea. So you know how teachers want students and their families to be more involved in their grades. Mm-hmm. So we were wondering why do families not get involved into students' grades and stuff like that. And we realized that most families, they really do not know how to use these devices. To me, operating a phone might be just easy as pie, but to an old elderly or it's not as easy. So I talked about having workshops to help, these parents access things like Canvas and like SmartPass and PowerSchool. And this was like such a big movement at our school because now the freshmen, the sophomore, their parents are just able to like access their grades. And it was just an opportunity that I was able to see like, wow, my voice really like helped this much parents and students make a change.
Well, and I'm sure your school felt the same, just hearing your voice and having the opportunity to hear from students and learn. I mean, that's such an important part of what we can and should do. And similarly, Alicia, you know, that works within the communities, right? Like, you know, we recognize that community schools sit within the communities as hubs, and the voices of the community become part of that. So how does that work with that hub in the community?
So Chinosom just lifted up a great example where when there is equal partnership and people are able to bring ideas and also identify gaps, right, that a school community can address together. I think of it often in restorative justice language or restorative practices, this idea of doing things with people as opposed to to or for people, right? So again, there's kind of an old school sort of, I'm going to call it patriarchal way of thinking about school, which is doesn't acknowledge the assets or strengths of community or of students or of the families or even the staff, right? It's more like you're going to impart knowledge as if a young person is an empty vessel. And we know that that is not true at all. So I think the shift in community schooling is really recognizing what, you know, some of my colleagues call like the gold that is within each young person and being able to mine that gold, right? And nurture the strengths and bring voices and perspectives that reshape how, again, what schools offer, how they operate, and the opportunities that we can provide together in service to the development of children in the end.
Well, and clearly that the model's working, right? I remember when I got here about 6 years ago, we had just 16 that we were starting up through a partnership, and now we have hundreds. And, you know, so what does that look like in terms of us supporting those schools? I mean, and how many do we have now?
Yeah. So Liz, thanks so much for lifting that up. I think it's really important to know that as LACOE, we serve dual roles, right? We serve roles as direct implementers of the work. And so really starting back in 2019 with 16 schools out there in the various districts throughout the county, we co-locate our own staff to really implement the work. And so really learning from these pilot schools to now help the over 500 community schools who are grantees across the county, which is about 1 in 5 in the state of California. Super exciting to have the largest concentration of community schools here. Or even across the country now at this point. And so through that, we've been named one of 8 regional transformational assistance centers to really support schools in co-learning what community schools is, because it is so locally driven, right? Every school requires its own kind of thinking and working and co-designing and co-learning about it. And so we have a team of folks who are part of the RTAC to really support schools side by side in that coaching and the guiding, professional learning, and really creating spaces of peer learning as well. And so I think that we have just this wonderful opportunity we've seen over the last couple of years about what that feels like and looks like. And actually I wanted to name and lift up things that both Chinosom and Alicia are raising around the partnerships piece. And so I'll say this as an example. When you think about partnerships and really supporting our schools through implementation of what this framework and this strategy is, it starts with the assets and needs assessment process, right? And so when we think about the assets and needs assessment process, so often as school educators, right, we're used to doing surveys, we're used to asking for feedback, but what does that really look like in terms of truly listening and honoring the voices of our students, like Chinosom, right? And the example that she shared, to really know that she's coming as an asset. Her family and the experiences that she brings is an asset. So starting there in that process, I think, is really important. And so we help schools and support schools in really strengthening what that assets and needs assessment process looks like by gathering voice and then building through that actions and goals in your student council or community schools advisory council. So really thinking about all of the different ways, again, that we're partnering with And through the RTAC, or Regional Transformational Assistance Center, really thinking about how are we having conversations, really deep conversations, when we start to think about community schooling as truly not a program, right? Really a strategy and a way and a mindset and a shift in the ways that we're approaching how we see our students, our families, and our staff.
Well, can I add to that?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm thinking about what you were saying, Michelle, just also the power of asking the question, whose voice is not being heard in this, right? Because, it's wonderful. Our schools have, in many cases, right, some level of parent engagement, a number of parent volunteers. But there are so many different ways that students and families can be a part of a school community. So I know one of the things that community schools has done particularly well is asking that question of, whose voice is not represented here, and that we have a responsibility to actively seek out those voices and make space, right? The table needs to be bigger in terms of decision making, in terms of, again, who is this school for? It really has to be for everyone.
Yeah, and actually thinking about that too, you made me think about the term engagement, right? And who we see on our school campuses. Yes. And I'll speak about families, for example. Just because we don't see them on our campus, right? Doesn't mean that they're not engaged in their child's education. Right. So how do we continue to partner with those who are physically present with us at schools,
absolutely,
but also who can't be physically present? And so how do we continue, again, because our systems are built the way that they are, how are our systems really trying to shift the ways that we are partnering, again, with students and families, right? And staff in a way that's different that we've done for decades, right? So again, it's that shift in thinking, and that's pushing and challenging us as a public education system to really think about that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and one of those shifts was related to creating this council, right? That was something new that you added, and you serve on our countywide council. And what has that experience meant to you?
That experience has been great and has gotten me a lot of different opportunities. But in that council, I've been able to express my different ideas and my different opinions. And I've really seen it blossom, and I've seen it take place. If I was to start, I would start off with what we said at the fall convention. And we talked about just having simple conversations we talked to teachers about just having simple conversations with their students about how that can make such a big change, and people do not realize that. And although I do not really think that this was implemented straight to our school, but I have seen the change happen in my school. A lot of teachers are having more conversations with students, and I feel like this is just a little part that this council has created, a little movement, and like she said, a little shift that this council might have created for schools. But it's such a great impact to me as a student because I can really see it, take place in my life.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome to hear that we're having an impact in that way.
Yeah, and I think that the Student Catalyst Council, just as Chinosom was saying, is an opportunity also to be a model for what we can do, sure, at the county levels, and that's what we're doing, but for schools to see, this is how we can lift up voices of students, and this is the types of ways. And maybe, we're learning through this process, and Chinosom's going to give us the feedback about how this process is, after the 2 years of her going through this, but also, again, co-learning alongside our schools and our LEAs who are also trying to implement and think about how do we engage student voice in a really meaningful way to help make decisions and guide the work that we're doing.
I love that. And I think we've been trying to do that at LACOE in general, right? That's just been a huge push and one that I think is really making a difference across the board. One of the things that I think we're all aware of is shifting funding, right? And so, we know this model works. We have evidence of it, year after year of evidence now. Michelle, how do we, continue this work in this kind of strange time of funding?
So I think that we think about the sustainability of this work in multiple ways. I think funding is one of them, right? And we think about the funding for the people who are implementing the work. Think about the staff that, for example, Chinosom has the wonderful honor and opportunity to get to work with, and the staff who work alongside administration, the entire school community of students and families and staff. But in addition to the funding pieces, we also have to think about sustainability in terms of process and procedures. And so what are the systems that we're starting to build at the school sites now, and the shifts, as we've been talking about, of mindsets and the systems that we're developing. And so I think first and foremost, how do we start to implement that piece of shifting the processes, procedures, and systems in schools to really lift up and leverage voice and agency, again, of our students, families, and staff. I think the other piece is, when we think about sustainability, is around programming, right? And how do we continue to sustain the partnerships that are being built? We know that through community schooling and through the process of the implementation, ultimately, you might find that we have existing partners, right? Or new partners that we're starting to work with to help to address some of the needs that folks are working to address. And so how do we continue to sustain those partnerships with folks to really do that? And when it comes down to funding, I think that there are multiple ways of really thinking about braiding and blending funds to really think about, the opportunities to lift up and to continue that continuity of work, because it doesn't take a year, 2 years to see that shift. When we're talking about a mindset shift, when we're talking about a system shift, that can take a really long time, right? And so I think that the focus for schools, LEAs, really will come down to making the decisions of sustainability and the vision that they have to work towards community schooling as a framework for their entire LEA.
I want to come off what Dr. Michelle said. So from my freshman year to my junior year, I have seen the shift that community school has had on my school in general. And I would say it has really impacted our school. Like coming from just personal needs, hygiene stuff to uniform donations, like calculators. I can really see the impact of community schools in our school. So when she talks about sustainability, I would really like that for the upcoming people from middle school to experience that and be part of that process, because it's really great. And even though it's just the little things, it really means a lot to students and even the families that are part of these workshops and, part of these movements, and they're getting involved. It means a lot to them. So I like what you're talking about, sustainability. That was, yeah.
Well, and we really should give a shout out to your school district, Hawthorne, which has community schools across the board, right, at all their high schools. And so they've really done a beautiful job there.
And if I can add, I think what we're lifting up as well is the ownership, right? The idea that when the school community owns the success of the school and the students in it, also some of those systems and structures, I think we recognize that we can't go back, right? Our school system can't regress, right? This is meaningful progress in improving conditions for teaching and learning for all students. And because of that, there is a shared ownership commitment, I believe, to sustain those structures, right? I think we're committed to, again, not going back, but continuing to go forward.
Alicia, recognizing that LACOE's been involved in community schools for quite some time, and we're very familiar with it, there's still a lot of people out there that may be less familiar with it. And so what would you say to teachers, administrators, school districts, community partners who are hearing about this and saying, wow, that's kind of a cool model, how can they get involved? What can they do to support it?
Wow. Okay. So there's so much there. I think getting familiar with the California approach, the framework for community schooling, is one important thing. There are proven practices. There are specific strategies that are being employed by all of the grantees across the state. Based on national research, there is a model and a framework that anyone can learn about. And I think also those regional transformational assistance centers, again, of which LACOE is one, are ways for any school community, any member of a school community, to learn more about what this model is, what it means, and its potential to, change conditions for teaching and learning. So I think getting familiar is first, right? Getting engaged wherever possible, advocating around this as sort of the way that we will do public schooling going forward, the way that public education should be in communities. I think that's something, again, we're deeply committed to supporting.
Yeah. Well, and as we close, I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to share, what is your ideal vision? I'm going to start with you, Chinosom, of what a community school in the future might look like.
My ideal of what a community school should look like is a place that welcomes both students, families, staff's ideas and concerns, and not only implements it into the school, but showcases to them that their ideas are, expressed into the school, and, whatever they bring up, they can see the impact into the school. That would be a great, community school.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I think a community school, when we think about that, is that every student, every family member, every staff member truly feels seen, feels heard, feels valued and supported. And I know that those are all big words, but truly, if you feel all of those things, the connection and the community that's really built in the school can be tremendous. And so that ultimately students at that center are successful and feel connected to what they're learning and what's happening inside and outside the classroom. So ultimately that.
So I may be duplicating some of what my counterparts here just shared, but I think schools where students are safe, physically and psychologically safe, schools where students are seen as assets, right? Their families as well, linguistically, culturally, and otherwise, supported through, better coordination of partnerships, again, nurturing the hopes and dreams of each young person, so that they feel empowered, right, to take on the world and take on whatever their goals and aspirations are, so that they can contribute meaningfully to community and to our society as a whole, because we recognize the power of our young people to help make our world more of a place that we all deserve. So I think to me, it's really tapping into all of that with kids at the center of it.
Which is why we believe so strongly in community schools at LACOE. So thank you, Alicia, Michelle, and Chinosom, for sharing your stories and vision. Community schools show us that education isn't just about academics. It's about partnerships, equity, and supporting the whole child. To learn more about LACOE's Community Schools Initiative, visit our website, www.lacoe.edu. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Graswich. I'll see you next time on EdBuzz.